What's going on, YouTube? It is me. Well, maybe you don't know me. This is actually my first video. Actually, you know what? I'll take that back. This is not my first video. I've had this channel for a while, but I just recently rebranded it, renamed it, deleted all my old channel videos, and now we are here, Ninja Turtle Customs. So I am stepping into the foray of making my own custom figures, and this here is my first ever completed figure. It is Rachel Summers, aka Prestige, from the X-Men Gold run. That was, I believe, 2018 is when it started. And I'm going to do a number of things today. So first off, I'm going to try to talk as quickly as possible because I know I have a lot of things to say and a lot of things to cover. This is my first figure, so there are a lot of things that I did right. There's a lot of things that I did wrong, and I want to go over all of those things with you. Also, I'm trying to also show you how to make one yourself. So although I will not be going so deep into it and showing you how to create hair or crack torsos or remove pins from the legs and any kind of detailed like directly showing you, but more of showing you this part came from here, and if you want to make this, you can use this, or giving you alternatives just in case you don't have resources to do exactly what I've done or get the exact hair or the exact head, etc., etc. And then there's just pros and cons. Maybe there's just you can't afford it, so maybe it's an old piece that I was able to acquire, you know, that sort of thing. So I want to help you the best that I can, whether you are very new to this or you are some seasoned veteran and maybe you can do better. I'm not going to claim that this is the best Rachel Summers figure custom on the planet, but the idea is to at least get the ideas going in your head, so if you want to make one yourself, it won't be so daunting, or you'll be able to fix any mistakes or just change things the way you like on your own figure. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start down low. All right, we're going to start with the feet. So you can see these are pretty standard feet, but the entire leg, from everything from the hip down, is coming from this very recently released Jean Grey, AOA Jean Grey. This is literally using these legs, just pop them right off and put them on this one. Obviously I stripped the paint off the light blue here, and on the red I stripped that paint and sanded it down and painted it as such. But you can see these are sculpted boots. The only detail that I did on the boots, which really isn't that a whole lot, but I took epoxy sculpt and went up and down here and spent all the way around, so you can see it's there as well, going all around, but it's only one little strip going across and going up. I didn't sculpt the entire from this point down to the knee. It's just one strip, and you can kind of see some of the lines there. That's kind of how it looks in the comics, and that's what I was going for. And really it's not all that necessary to spend that much sculpt to just do the entire leg. These cloth ripples are a part of the actual Jean Grey, and that's one of the reasons why I used the Jean Grey as is, because this body mold in particular, these legs are like what they use for bodysuits basically. So on these Jean Grey, and then not just Jean Grey, but if you're looking for more of the bodysuit, like I said, the cloth ripples on there, you can use this Jean Grey, but it only really goes up to the leg. But all of the other figures that have that kind of feature are basically ones that are wearing bodysuits, like the recent Black Widow, the Deadly Origin Black Widow, and the other Black Widow that came with the motorcycle. They're using the exact same body. But any sort of blue jean type of wearing figure, like the Mary Jane or the Punk Storm, she's wearing blue jeans, they have the same kind of leg, and it's meant to be either blue jeans or a body suit, like the Black Widow, like I said. So I took those legs and put them on this here. Now this upper torso is not the same, so let's get into that part. That is going to be completely different. Okay, so the upper torso, the abs, and the the lower torso, the upper torso, that's all coming from Polaris. In fact, the Polaris is a figure I'm going to use a whole lot in making my customs. In particular, also the cape, you can see it's the exact same cape, but you can't see some of those details like the buttons. I painted all of that. Just to go back real quick, the red that you see here is the paint that I've been using is Model Masters. So for the most part, hopefully that'll focus. But Model Masters is the paint that I've been using for the body. I use that for all the hard plastic painting, and this one in particular is Insignia Red. I'm sorry you can't see it, it's all smudged anyway, but this particular color is Insignia Red for all of the red that you see on her body and the hands, the legs, and so on. And then the black, I used semi-gloss black. Now that actually is kind of a mistake. I didn't want to use semi-gloss black. I mean, I did, but I didn't want it to come out this shiny. I didn't intend for that. So actually I did do some things to dull that down. So this is not pure semi-gloss black, but I'll get back to that later. But that is what I painted with. It was semi-gloss black. And then I took more epoxy sculpt, which I should go ahead and mention that as well. I used this brand of epoxy sculpt, and this is just part B, but there's also part A. And if you don't know how to use epoxy sculpt, again, I'm not going to go through direct tutorials on how to do everything. I learned from watching other YouTubers, other customizers, and how to crack a torso, how to sculpt hair or things like that. I haven't gotten that good yet, but how to use epoxy sculpt and make copies and etc. I didn't even go to that much of extent in making things, but all of that, all those resources are out there. So I don't want to be someone repeating what has already been said and has already been made. I want to concentrate on this direct figure here. So I did use epoxy sculpt and I tried to do my best. So what I did is I went around just like this, just like it is in the comic books. But one of the kind of the ambiguous things about how she's depicted and how this costume looks is this line is inconsistent going across her torso, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I just kind of looked at as many resources as I could on the comic books, and whether or not it went across the back, you know, how much, even if that red part going up her chest, going up her back goes up, you know, or is it supposed to be fully black? I didn't know initially, but I looked at as many resources as I could, and I settled with this, and I think it looks pretty good that way. I also threw this line in there, you can kind of see, which is also in the comics, is just like a seam. That's what that's meant to be. Not like a solid black line. I didn't paint that. It's just when I did the epoxy sculpt and applied that before it hardened, I took the X-Acto knife and just cut right down the middle and just make sure it was there. And when I put all the epoxy sculpt on, I usually will let it dry, but try to press it as thin as possible. And after that, I'll get the a Dremel and try to make it as flush as possible. So I don't, like, normally, and what you could do, you don't even need epoxy sculpt to do this. You can just paint it. You can just paint this black and then paint red, or paint red and then paint everything else black. You don't have to do what I did. Just like here with the actual figure from Hasbro, they didn't sculpt this green onto her body. Her body is green, and then they paint it as green plastic, and they painted flesh tone on the sides. You can do that. That will save you from buying epoxy sculpt altogether. You don't need epoxy sculpt to do what I did. You can just paint the boots. You can just paint the chest and all of this detail there. That's 100% your call. So it is an artist's choice how you want your figure or drawing or whatever it is to be depicted and what you want. I mean, for me, this is going to sit on my shelf. This is not a commission or anything like that. So I'm doing it how I want, and I want it to look like this, and I want to use epoxy sculpt. For me, using the sculpt helps make a solid line. It's like you're coloring within the lines, and I'm actually making a line by making it epoxy sculpt. It's something hard, and it's something that's, again, slightly raised. You can see just a little bit off the figure there, because I sanded it down because I want it to be close to flush, but not so flush that I don't see the difference in where I should be painting. But yeah, it just makes a hard place for me to paint, so I know stop here and, you know, start the new color there. So that's how my figures will look. For the most part, I'll try to avoid things like this, because honestly what they do when they have these sorts of things is that this, her flesh, her arm is flesh colored plastic, but her torso is green colored plastic, and now they have to find the same kind of paint to match what's here versus her arm and her face. And normally they don't do that very well. I mean, this isn't bad and it's not going to be completely wrong, but I don't like that because now you have two different flesh tones, and it's inconsistent, a consistent thing that Hasbro does in general. So I try to avoid that as much as possible. And on future things that I make, I'm going to try to match the color tone that's on the face to the rest of the body, from whether it be, you know, plastic, like direct flesh tone plastic, or I'm just going to take their head and then paint it so that all of it's consistent and it's all one color. Getting back to Rachel here, her arms also have the same type of fabric that is reflected in her legs, like there's a bodysuit, and these arms came directly from the Walgreens exclusive Emma Frost. I'm going to hold her up because, you know, she's got heels, and who knows if she'll actually stand right now. No, we'll hold her up. But yeah, I use these arms directly. So one of the things I actually did, which was a mistake, is when I took these arms off, I removed the flesh color paint, which you can do with acetone or nail polish remover, 100% acetone, and took the flesh color paint off there because this is all black plastic. And I could have and should have just directly taken this off and put it in there. But my mistake is when I went to this bicep, I started sanding the bicep down for whatever reason. I'm sorry, it's losing focus. But yeah, I started sanding the bicep and acting like it was going to need paint on it, even though black is the color that I want and black is the color that it's going to be. And I ended up having to paint it anyway because I started sanding it. But that was my mistake. But these cuffs also, they come from here. This entire arm comes from this Emma Frost. But the hands, which are the exact same hands, but I didn't use them from Emma Frost for whatever reason. It would have been easier because it's just using her whole hands. But I took Medusa. I had Medusa already cracked open and torn apart, and I just grabbed Medusa's hands. So these are actually purple underneath, and painted those. I did prime them all. Speaking of priming, I didn't do a great job of that, at least in my opinion. When I didn't really prime any of the black areas, and I don't think it's necessary to prime black, or prime before you paint black, because it's just going to absorb the colors anyway. But for all the red, you can kind of see some streaks in there. It's kind of hard to pick that up on camera, but in person I can still see the streaks of the primer. But also, like I said, these legs come from Jean Grey, and Jean Grey's legs are dark blue, so that primer was very necessary, but I didn't prime it enough. I think I only put one coat of primer on here, so you can kind of see streaks of the white from the brush strokes of the primer on her legs, but you can also see streaks of the dark blue from just me not priming it all that well. And that's all over too. So the epoxy sculpt, which is all of this, that turns gray when it is fully dried. So you got some streaks in there from priming, and some streaks in there just from brush strokes, and some streaks in there from just the color. But ultimately it doesn't look that bad on camera. It actually looks pretty nice. To avoid brush strokes, you could also airbrush if that's something that you have resources for, or something that you prefer. A way to get rid of or not have brush strokes is airbrushing, but I don't want to have that kind of setup. I'm going to probably stick with hand brushing, and again, all of the paint was done by hand. Now in particular, these cuffs and the hair are painted with different paint. I didn't use Model Masters. Same thing with the cape, which I will get into right now actually. So the cape, again, was coming from Polaris, but you can see it's cut off short. So that was also another thing that I was debating on. And the initial appearance for this costume, which X-Men Gold #1, this cape was really short. Like it came up to like almost here, like only went down to her stomach or her elbows. And then later on in the run of the comics, you can see, and even actually in the same issue, all of her drawing was very inconsistent. Some of the times, again, this line would go all the way across. Sometimes it would just be short and just cut off like a little bit here. Sometimes she would have the paint on her face and sometimes she wouldn't. Sometimes this cape would be super short, sometimes it would be long, and it's all in the same first issue of that run. But throughout the rest of the run, most of the time the cape was pretty long, and sometimes it was pretty short. So I kind of compromised and just cut it off just right here at the thigh, and I think it looks pretty good like that as is. It's gold on the underneath, which that's a whole nother thing. I tried mixing paints. The paint that I use in particular is it's called Angelus leather paint. Hey, focus. So why switching paints? This leather paint is great for any kind of material that is very pliable, something that is bending and whatever, as opposed to the hard plastic that is like a leg or something like that. You would use the leather paint on hair and on capes and other accessories that are very soft, because it'll help it from not tearing and ripping and such, and stuff like that. So I use Angelus, and I tried to make my own gold. So this gold here is just Angelus gold on these two little metal parts there, because it is gold metal for the most part. But underneath, I wanted a gold color, because most X-Men, they're blue gold, and in this case it's not really yellow. I would consider it's gold. So I don't have a non-metallic Angelus gold, so I tried to make my own. And I think I kind of failed at it, but it doesn't look awful, but it just doesn't match the color gold that I was trying to get. But for the most part, it's yellow and brown mixed up together. And just trying to, actually, I don't even think I had brown at the time, now that I'm thinking about it. I think I tried to make brown or make something like that, like mixing yellow, white, and then some other colors to try to get this color, but it just didn't work out. But it still doesn't look awful. And again, the backside in particular I use is called Crimson Red, not just this straight up red. I use this for something else, but not on this figure. But this is Crimson Red, and you can also see some brush strokes there. Again, I had to prime this, so there are brush strokes there. There's some of the primer that is coming through that you can kind of see, and kind of green in there as well. I think I only primed it once. I would recommend with priming that you at least put 2 coats on there, but I'm still very early on in trying to make customs, so I can't 100% say that's the best way to do it. One of the problems is back here, on these figures, they have this the peg hole there for the cape. Yeah, I had to jam that in there because it has so many coats of paint in there, and I did try my best to keep that hole open and normal size, but with the layers of paint on there as is, it was hard to keep that size perfect for it fitting in that hole. So I ended up pushing it in there, and it started ripping, starting tearing, paint rub basically. Speaking of paint rub, that's another thing we need to get into. This was again, my first custom, and as I was researching customs and trying to figure out how to do things, I was cracking torsos, I was taking apart hands and arms and figuring out what's the best way to approach it. So even with hands, what I would recommend doing is, if you are going to do hands, is sanding it while it's still together. You can still take the hand out. I'm not going to do that with this one. All right, while it's still together, you can take it out like this, or you can leave it plugged in, but this is probably best. But sand this little nub as much as possible, and sand it again on the other side. Sorry for the focus, but you're gonna keep that sanded, that disc there, you're gonna sand that, and then you can paint it. Now I would recommend only painting about 1 coat on it, maybe priming it and painting the coat that you need it to be, but not going over overdoing it and trying to get the exact color to match and all that, because it's ultimately not a featured part of the figure and you don't want the paint rub. So one of the things I did though is I actually cut it out. There's like a little bar in there, and it's the same thing in the neck and in the feet. I cut it off and then pulled it out, and then I tried to paint it that way, and then when I put it back I had to glue it back in with super glue. So that doesn't, you can see some of the residue in there is actually some of the super glue, and some of that is paint rub because I painted excessively. In fact, I painted the entire thing. It's like I said, you don't need to paint the pin that goes in there because no one's going to see that. But for me, this being my first one, this is a mistake that I made. I painted that and I cut it out. So in this hand in particular, it's a little loose. I don't want it to be posed that often, so I don't worry about it. This hand came out flawlessly despite all of the extra paint and all of the extra things that I've done to it. Same thing with the feet. I painted all of this all the way down, so everything in there, including the part that goes into the foot, I painted that too. That is completely unnecessary because no one's going to see that. So what's the point of doing that? So going forward, that's just a lesson that I've learned that you should avoid. Same thing with the neck as well. So this, and it actually goes into another mistake that I made. So one of the things, like I said, I cracked the torso, and I also cut off, like I said, there's like a little bar in there for the neck. I cut that out in my early attempts of trying to make figures and understand them, and then I tried to glue it back in, but unfortunately when I cut it, it wasn't a smooth cut. It wasn't a straight cut. So when I tried to glue it back on, the glue, and this is a very small piece, the glue got all over my hands, and I tried to put it back in, and then when I put it back in, the glue's on my hands and not on the little piece, and it barely stuck in there, and I kind of settled for it. And then that's only one side of it, and then the other side I tried to put everything back together and then glue it in, and I thought it was okay and everything was looking good. And then after a couple days, the glue just loosened up and I was able to just pull everything right off. The head just came off, and it was a disaster. And another thing I did, ended up, again, this is the second attempt. This is the first attempt at the upper torso. This upper torso on the back side is too big, so I ended up making it smaller on this one. And you can see also another mistake that I made, which wasn't costly, but the inside part here, I sanded it and painted it, and that's the primer right there. That's completely unnecessary. You can even see some of the red paint in there because I tried to paint that. That's the part that you might see if she looks upward, and you can see up her, you know, the inside basically of her chest. So I tried to paint that red so it looks good, but that's so unnecessary, especially for me since I'm not much of a figure poser. They usually are pretty static in their poses on my shelf, so why do I care to paint that on the inside? No one's going to see it. So for me, I think that's just something that you can avoid altogether. You don't need to crack your figures. In fact, if you wanted to make what I have, you can just use Polaris. Literally almost all of this is Polaris. The only difference is the leg. So actually it's another thing that I need to get into. So these legs are completely different than here, although they're about the same size. These are their old legs, their old standard legs, where these legs are the more, well, I say they're customizer friendly in the very least, but they pop on and off just like a head would. So these don't do that. These actually, you either need to crack the torso, or you need to cut and crack these hips just to get the bar on the inside out. And you don't need to do that for the thighs or anything like that. But what I mean by these legs, these legs pop off like easily, relatively easily. There you go. So yeah, they just pull right off and they snap right back in. Yeah, that's super easy. And you can do that with all of these legs that are from these body suit type legs, and you can do that with also these legs on the Summer Frost. Other legs that have that are more full, these are, I would consider, fuller legs, and the reason why I used Jean's legs in particular instead of Emma's is because Emma's legs are bigger, just by a little bit. They're a fuller leg. So you can take these legs though and just snap them right on. So I like the idea of having swappable legs, just like you can have swappable heads. Although this won't work, or I should say the swappable head part won't work on my Rachel, and which I will get back to in just a second. But we will talk about the head right now. So this head, if you haven't guessed it by now, is coming from this wasp. So it is literally that face, but one of the things that I tried to do in my early tests is I tried to make a copy of this head. So, and I actually successfully did do that, and that's what you're looking at here. This is copy number 2, but this is copy number 1. So I made this, and that's using Smooth On products. Again, there's videos on the YouTube to show you how to do that. But one of the things that I found was an issue is that when I made copies of these heads, the heads on the inside, these little the gaps, whatever, it looks like it's the same size. It looks like it is, but when I tried putting it on, it didn't work. It would be too tight. So you could heat it up and then put it onto the ball, and then that would work and it would snap in like normal. But after that, you want to take it off, you have to heat it up again, and I didn't want to have that problem. However, one of the other things that I have to mention when using this head, because I did end up using, obviously I used this head anyway, is that you can see normally, which actually, here you go, here's normally, I haven't glued her hair back on, so there's that. I took her hair off just to do this, and one of the reasons why I used Wasp in particular is because I liked the way she looked with her hair. It reminded me of Rachel in her hound costume, like back in the 80s with her short hair. It just needs like the pigtails. So I was like, okay, let's just use Wasp's head. But one of the reasons why my copy looks the way it does is the hair has these little gaps, or the head has these little gaps there. And I filled that in with epoxy sculpt to make it smoother and make it round, to make it a whole circular head, and that's what this is. Well, actually, what happened is I copied Wasp's head first as is, and then it came out like this, but with the gaps. And then I took the epoxy sculpt and filled that in so it was a round, smooth, and evenly, head without any type of bumps or whatever. And then once that's hardened, I copied that head and made this head, and then I had to sand this head down and make it smaller. Why? Because her hair comes from the Infinity War Black Widow. So that is the exact same hair. And the problem, again, having to sand down this head, or this head, is that the MCU heads, these photoreal heads, these from these figures, they're much smaller than the comic book heads. So the hair is made for a smaller head. So this big head, it wouldn't work. The big head from Wasp. So again, I sanded it down to be the same size as the Infinity War Black Widow, so it would fit. I also, when I cut, like I said, I also filled this in to make it smooth. The hair has the same little spots, not the exact same for every hair, and every head is different. Where these sockets are. So to make it easy, that's why I filled it in to make this round. And then on the head, on the inside, the ports, I cut those out so it's smooth on the inside and then smooth here. And when I put it on, it's just glue it on so that it's all smooth. But that's how you make that work. Now the only other issue, again, with making your own heads is matching the flesh tone. So the Smooth On has its own flesh tone, and this is like regular flesh tone, not making it lighter or darker or anything like that, but it just wasn't the right color to match you know, like this flesh tone or any other flesh tone from Jean Grey or Cyclops or anybody else that's Caucasian. So I tried my best to then paint this to look like this, and this was good enough for me, although it's still not what I wanted it to be for the flesh tone. And you can also see that she doesn't have an eyeliner there. I really wanted to add the eyeliner, so just like this one. But man, that is a very, very, very difficult thing to do, especially when you don't have a steady hand and it's such a small space and you don't have a small brush. So I ended up just, after 4 attempts of trying to get the eyes right, I gave up on the eyeliner. I tried doing the eyeliner at least 4 times and had to keep removing it and putting it back, all the paint, and just starting all over 4 times, and I just gave up. Other than that, the other paints that I use on here again are Model Masters for the hard plastic. It is they have 2 flesh tone paints, but I mixed them both and then kind of just changed the tint of it just a little bit so it can come out to be what it is, but I still have to play around with that in the future. Flat black on these markings on her face. You can see that wasn't very straight of me. Again, did that by hand. I don't have a steady hand. This is translucent red for the lipstick, and again, that's Model Masters. And then they have gloss green for the green eyes. Sorry for the shadows. Gloss green for the green eyes. And then lastly, her hair, going back to Angelus again. So actually I said I didn't use that on this figure. I lied, I did. Angelus red, leather acrylic paint with a little bit of yellow, because I wanted it to be orange red hair, but I didn't have orange at the time, so I just took more red and added a little bit of yellow, mixed it together, and got this color. So I'm actually very pleased with how the hair turned out. It doesn't have any wash to it. Compare that to what it used to look like, which is blonde. I did prime it and then orange red type color, so that came out that way. And I'm pretty happy with how this figure turned out. So as far as paint rub goes, I think I started to talk about that earlier. There is a little bit of paint rub in the leg and the foot there, but it's not that bad. I have not noticed any paint rub in the legs whatsoever. So I've got the ability to just bend these knees however I want them. I did completely take out the pins and paint those on the outside, not the inside. The knee joint itself, that entire thing, I painted that. I do have paint rub here in the hips, so you can see green in there because that's from Polaris. I do have paint rub there. That's something that I will be working on and have already. I've already started working on other customs, and I've already, don't have that issue going forward. However, I'm going to leave it just the way it is. I don't want to mess around with this thing anymore. But there's no paint rub on the torso at all. The arms, again, this is black plastic coming from the Emma Frost, so all of this is already black, so there's no paint rub there. And on the face, the head, oh yes, the last thing, there's no paint rub up in here on the neck joint, but the head, like I said, it doesn't fit actually. So that head is something that it goes on the same type of body mold that this Polaris comes from, but the wasp head, at least my copy of the wasp head, did not fit on there. So after messing around with it for about a week or so, I got tired of trying to add more Mod Podge or super glue and sanding it, making it bigger, making it tighter, and it just didn't work out. So I ended up just gluing it on there. It's permanently glued to the neck thing on there, so that means I can't turn her neck left or right. I don't mind that. She can still go up and down because that joint still works, but I can't turn her head left or right. Again, my posing is very static on my shelves, so I don't care. She can just be like that. It's not going to be something that she needs to look that way or look that way. I can care less about it. But that is Rachel. Guys, if you have any questions about how to make this, you can use different heads, of course. I would suggest that you do, but if you really like using the wasp head like mine, I don't blame you. But you can use whatever head you want, you can use whatever hair you want. I'm trying to go for that comic book accurate hair as best I can without doing any sculpting work, but you have other options for short hair. Again, you can even just use this hair if you really want to. There's other short hair figures out there, and you don't have to use the Emma Frost as well. You can buy the Black Widow, the Deadly Origin, or the one with the bike, or the Black Cat, the all new, all different. They all have the same type of sculpt on the arms, so the cloth fabric works there. And yeah, that's it. It's really not that complicated of a custom, but I did want to explain all of the things that are right and the things that are wrong with it, since this is my very first one that I ever did. I will be making these videos fairly infrequently, but I do have quite a number of customs on the way that I'm currently working on, and will be wrapping up very soon. So you can expect another video on the channel very soon. But make sure you guys are following me here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like if you like this video, and share it with your friends. Also, I do live streams on Twitch. I play on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/ninja_chortle, and you can see me play games on there Monday through Friday, and Sundays is when I do any art streams where I'm actually working on my custom. So you can go ahead and follow me on Twitch. On Twitter, I'm just Ninja Chortle, and same thing on Instagram. Also, make sure you check out my other YouTube channel, which is Ninja Chortle, and all of my streams from the gaming side are on the gaming YouTube channel, where this one is just Ninja Chortle Customs. Lastly, I do have a Discord. I post all of the behind the scenes work in progress pictures of all my action figures on my Discord. Link in the description below. It is a public Discord, so you can just join, you can just follow and just check it out. There's no membership fees or anything like that. So I will see you guys the next time. I've already about 50 to 75% completed the next custom, so it should be up very, very soon. See you guys.